unscripted, unfiltered, and it could very well be uncomfortable. Coming to you from the beautiful Pacific Northwest, this is the Badger Fishing Show.
Well, this is where we're at. We got Deception Pass right there, live and on location.
Man, thanks so much for joining me this morning. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Super excited. This has been a long time in the making. This has been highly requested. This is an opportunity for us to have these conversations that we seem to always be having.
Yep.
And make them public, make people see some of the conversations. Yeah, you guys probably know me. I'm Phillip from Badger Fishing Online. I've been doing short form social media stuff for a little while now. And I met Alex earlier this year from that content, and it absolutely resonated. And right from the first conversation that he and I had, we hit it off. And we've had a ton of conversation. We've been super involved with some processes with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and I knew right away that I'd like to share some of these conversations. And so here we are.
Yep.
Yeah, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning. Appreciate it. This started with him and I way back in January, and I was just like, dude, I got a real shitty Instagram page and I want to make some videos, and I figured I'd reach out and pick your brain on how you were doing this. And then while that conversation, I was like, hey, you got plans for NOF? And you were like, it's on my radar. And I was like, it should be. I think we had a couple weeks of a 1 hour conversation each week, and we would just tackle some things, have some questions, and we would just continue to know each other, get to know each other, and build this knowledge bank on North of Falcon. And I think I said, hey, one thing you should go try to see if you could find, and go look at Hatchery Surplus.
Oh yeah.
Go find Hatchery Surplus. And I think you had sent me a text by 6 a.m. or something the next morning, and it had the $5 to $15 million, $5 to $20 million contract that the department had just put out on selling their excess hatchery fish. And I was like, dude, here's the guy. I told Ed right away. I was like, dude, he's the one that's gonna really push this to where I wanted to see it go, as far as really vocalizing the things that are going, really digging into North of Falcon specifically.
I'm excited. One. I did think that the content from the Hatchery Surplus was going to be that easy. When you first start calling the Department of Fish and Wildlife, they don't give you a whole lot of information. Man, it was like first ring, that lady picked up the phone, and she happened to be the one that wrote the contract. And she just started talking, and I started talking, and it just started flowing. And I had asked questions, and she'd give me the answers. And here we go. We're finding out that we bury fish on hatchery ground sometime. And then I made a little post about it, and people started sending me pictures of examples at their local hatchery. Yeah, that was I had no clue that happened.
Yeah, that's going to factor into some of our conversations that we're going to have later. I know that we've got some stuff that's going to factor into when we get farther deeper into NOF, but I would concur to your opening message. I seriously think that we're on the verge of something here that could be super meaningful. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. Yeah. We truly want to take some of this information that we have acquired, that I've learned over the years, that you've learned through research and your participation, and really take the time to break it down, unlike where anywhere else is doing it.
Yeah.
Take the time to talk about things at that 10,000, 5,000, 1,000 foot levels, and try to make it simpler. Try to give the folks out there that are yearning for that call to action, to give them that call to action. But at the same time, like, we're going to sit here and have that boat talk, or that.
Speaking of that, who's going to be the other players in this? Is Ed going to be a player in this?
The mystery man. Yeah, I would imagine that every now and then we'll have an Ed sighting.
Okay.
How he likes to operate. No one will know as he comes and goes. Shoot, he could be. You never know. So yeah, I think we'll see a little bit of Ed.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I'm excited for it. We're gonna let the banter roll. We're gonna talk some crap, and we're gonna share some stories, and we're gonna try to do our best to give folks that are listening a much deeper look into some of this process stuff that we've engulfed ourselves in, and help them find their way of understanding and then also being involved.
Yeah, completely. And our topic today is going to be NOF, North of Falcon. And we're going to dig deep into that. And I think that's going to pull out quite a few other topics that we're going to try not to get too deep in the weeds on, because we have quite a bit of stuff on deck already. As soon as I started texting people, messaging people that we were going to do a podcast together, it didn't take much to fill the first 6, 7, 8, 10 slots. We've got a current WDFW staff member that's going to come on the show and talk.
Yep.
So we have a former WDFW retired hatchery manager with over 20 years of hatchery experience that's going to deep dive into the hatchery process. We got a WDFW retired game warden that's going to come on and talk about everything that you should know in regards to our fisheries from a game warden's perspective. Got a good friend of mine, John Hillstrand from Deadliest Catch, that's going to come on the show. That should be an absolute hoot. I've made some content with him and it's gone super viral. So I think we're going to try and keep that one to an hour. But when he gets on the show and he gets talking, who knows how long that's going to be. But we got some seal and pinnipeds advocates and professionals that are going to go on there and talk about some of the issues with those. And I actually have a NOAA biologist that's going to come on the show lined up and really talk about some of the specific issues that we have here in the Puget Sound that are really restricting our fisheries that I had no clue on. And one of them is the Hood Canal Bridge, which I'm super excited to talk about. But yeah, let's dig right into. I do have Kevin's my friend. You got Ed's your friend. And I think I hope to get both of those guys on the show and give another perspective to what it's like to have the boat talk. And a lot of our thoughts and angles that we discuss on this stuff is formed from them. So it's super exciting. North of Falcon, if you've been to North of Falcon or if you watched the North of Falcon, that's the salmon season setting process. And I fished in Washington for over 20 years. I fished out in the ocean a lot, Westport and La Push. I fished in a lot of the Northwest rivers, up in the Solduck, Bow Shield, Kalawa, Ho. Fished all through some of the Grays Harbor rivers, the Hump, the Satsup, the Wainuchi. And as soon as I started talking to you about NOF, I knew that one of the areas that I really needed to put emphasis on trying to figure out was the Puget Sound and the Puget Sound portion of NOF. And so we went to that Falcon meeting together, the North of Falcon meeting, forecast meeting down in Olympia.
Yep.
And you've been, how many times have you been to NOF?
I started listening about 2019, 2021 is when I made a commitment to be present at every single meeting possible. Yeah. I took those first couple of years to learn and then just figure out through connection and just from listening and doing research, just learn the process, what decides when we get a fish or what we get a fish, how long we get a fish, just take all that in as much as I could for those first couple of years. Then when 2021 came around, some of our COVID closures and some mismanagement things. And so I was like, I'm going to be involved from here on forward. And the biggest thing was that diehard Marine Area 7 guy. I'm born and raised in La Conner, Washington. And so my dad worked out of Anacortes doing custom marine canvas work. I've had this affinity towards the San Juan Islands my whole life. So I was not hearing very much representation for Marine Area 7 at these meetings. I was starting to see these major kind of reductions in our opportunity up here. Well, I'm not going to sit here and rely on someone else to do the petitioning for the area that I hold dear. So then I started and probably didn't make a lot of friends at first.
I'm watching back to 2022. You can watch every single minute of every single North of Falcon on YouTube on the Department of Fish and Wildlife's website. And I'm all the way back to 2022, and I'm just starting to get some of the saucy version of Alex on the NOS. So yeah, if you want to learn, get up to speed on some of the lingo and the vernacular, YouTube, Department of Fish and Wildlife's website's a great place to do that.
Yeah, they're real awesome meetings to listen into. You'll just be sitting on the edge of your seat, riveting. It's a tough process to endure. It's arduous, fruitless. you feel like you don't have a lot of control, and a lot of times I think we'll probably touch on all these kinds of descriptions of the process throughout this conversation. If you want to learn some more and you go back and watch those YouTube videos, you had to be ready to fall asleep. It's going to take a little bit of time, but yeah, it's there.
So this was my first North of Falcon process.
Yeah.
Just this last January, February. And first thing that I noticed when I walked in the room is there is more staff, Department of Fish and Wildlife staff, than there's actual representatives of the constituents in that room. Has it always been like that?
Yes, for the most part. You really don't see a ton of physical in-person presence until you get to NOF2.
Yeah.
I would say that they certainly know how to fill a room, department staff.
They for sure do. And the other thing that I noticed was a lot of the guys that were in the room, there was no fresh legs. There was nobody that was you and I's age. Everybody has been going there for a long time. They've been involved with it for a super long time. They're the salty dogs, which is great. They have all the history. They have all the information. A lot of times they have more information than some of the department staff, and the department, they're asking a constituent in the crowd if, hey, correct or not. Yeah, that was definitely something that was interesting.
So usually by the last week of February is when that forecast meeting will happen.
We started out rolling out, the department speaks first, and then they have questions at the end. The department talked about new app. They highlighted that new app. And if you've seen some of my content, you have seen some of the inadequacies or how archaic the actual app really can be.
Yeah.
It has its issues. It has its downsides, but I think some of the positive things now being inside of the process is it's going to give us some real-time data. And if you can get through the fact that VTRs aren't really a thing in there, and you keep your battery charged and don't drop your phone in the water, if you can get through all that stuff, it could be extremely beneficial.
Yeah, I think they're going to make it a requirement to be on the app at some point. I went traditional this year. I went with the traditional license. I just want them to work some of that stuff out before I make the dive. And I think the number one thing, multiple users on one login. You have your children, they have to have a separate device with the app logged in and their own login. And how's that? My son's almost 5. He's not going to get a phone and get an app login. I'm not dealing with that.
You get paper this year. If you get it before July, you get the waterproof paper. But if you get it after July, it's getting printed on 8.5 by 11 paper that as soon as it gets wet, turns into paper mache.
Yeah, you'll have to print them at your own house. Okay, the forecast meeting definitely started with talking about that, about the unveiling of that.
Then they went into weather. This year is going to be an El Nino year. They talked about snowpack being an issue, and it's going to be a huge issue. And as we went through NOF, they really started talking about that at the end at PFMC, that a lot of these in-river fisheries are going to get managed to the fact that rivers are going to be really low towards the end of the summer, and they might restrict or do emergency closures on some of these rivers to protect some of those runs as they were coming back. That was a big highlight.
They did talk about budget.
That's a perfect time to talk about. I've got a couple hundred record requests in, and some of these record requests that are easy, they come back relatively quick. Some of them are taking some time. And I'm going to try and announce new records requests that I get back at each one of these shows that we do. And one of the records requests that I got back this week was a payment that I saw of almost $200,000. And I went into the public checkbook fiscal website that you can get on Washington's department website. And you can see every single check that's written by every government agency. And one of the checks was written by the Department of Fish and Wildlife to a corporation that has only been around for a year. It's called Anvil Rock Distributors. So I did a records request on that. A corporation that's only been formed for a year getting a $200,000 check, and it came back. And what it came back was for logs. They were going to be used to try and restore an in-river log jam.
Yeah.
They wanted 240 40-foot long logs, and then they wanted 6 logs that were 40 feet long with root balls. Now, I've developed my fair share of land in my life. I've logged some land, and I just started to do some math in my head from the logging that I've done. And I know Washington cedar usually gets the most money. And if you got some really clean maple, you can get money. Then there's Doug fir. And so I just called the last logging company that I had used, and I just said, "Hey man, how are you doing? Been a while. How many logs, 24 inches in diameter?" Because that's what this check was written for. This contract was written for. How many 24-inch logs fit on a log truck? He goes, "Oh, 10 to 15." I said, "Okay, let's use just 15 for the number." I go, "If I were to bring you some really nice 40-foot long Douglas fir logs, how much would I get paid per truckload?" And he said, "Right now, probably between 1,500 and 2 grand." I go, "Well, let's just use 2 grand." So you do 240 logs divided by 15, start doing the math, and there's 100,000 or more dollars worth of profit in a contract that was used to do in-river restoration. Like, who's managing that? Who's
Yeah.
looking at that contract? Why are we not using a company that's been in business
Yeah.
for 20 years, go right to the log mills? Like, if we have these budget cuts and we have these issues with funding, why are we spending money like that?
I don't think you're saying that you're against the river restoration projects.
No, not
I
at all.
think you are saying that the vetting
Yes.
and the oversight on how that money is spent and being optimized is where the issue is. So it's interesting that when we get into the forecast meeting and we get this reminder of budget not being too friendly or too favorable, there's significant budget cuts. There is. Let's call a spade a spade. It's significant. The legislature did WFW no favors in their budget. So it's funny that we get into these meetings and then they want to set us up to remind us about how bad the budget is. A couple of years
How
ago,
bad the management of the money is what it is.
right. And a couple of years ago, it was like they were swimming in money. Botsel, former fish program or former salmon and steelhead manager for the state, he used to be like, "Oh, the legislature was super kind to us. They were acting like they had money coming out of their ears and went and bought boats and did all this with it, and now they're dealing with a budget cut and they just want to set us up for how that's going to be
Restriction.
so we get through
After
that.
they talked about this warming weather and how it's creating some phenomenons with some of these fisheries. That I think they talked about that bluefin tuna that washed up in North
up here,
2023.
Yep.
That mahi that was caught down off Westport. There was a marlin last year that was caught off Oregon. And then at the time, they talked about that whale that had to be euthanized that was found on the beach of Oregon. Now here we are in April, almost May, and we've had 17 whales wash up on the shores here in Washington and 4 or 5 down in Oregon. And
Did the whale that went into
yeah,
Grace Harbor,
into the river,
yeah,
it died.
that one did? Because then we also had one here in the Swinomish Channel in Connor, which that runs north and south, and it'll exit at a body of water. I think it made it out. I'm pretty certain it did, but it was a little confusing to see one come into the channel. So some anomalies for sure.
Yeah. If you look at, I went and looked at Noah's website earlier today. The average in Washington is 5 whales. So it's not like no whales ever come on shore and die. But it's 5. Now we're not even halfway through the year, and we already have 3 times that amount. And every single one of them, they're saying, is emaciated and malnourished. So something's going on with weather that's an issue. But after they talked about the weather, they talked about all that, they went right into the forecast. And they talked about Puget Sound Chinook forecast. The hatchery fish were up 16% over last year. And then natural origin were up 7% over last year. And I was excited about that. I went into North of Falcon 1 thinking, hey, everything's up.
We're working on abundances.
We're working with abundances. Like coho, hatchery were up 45%. The wilds were up 50% over the 10-year average. And then over last year, the hatcheries were up, I think, like 4%. And then wilds were up 53% over last year. So to me, we were rocking and rolling. I still had some hard questions for them. And it was my first time asking questions. I tried to be really polite. I think that's a really good way to get really far with the department. And one of the things that I talked about was those documents, getting the postseason documents faster, because the Mark Selective postseason report, we didn't even have it at the time at that forecast meeting for last year. So we didn't even know how many Chinook we really caught from last year. And I brought up, hey, that's an issue. Like we need to be able to have tangible conversations 5 or 6 months after the fishery closed and we're in a day and age now where you need to be able to get that data to us so we can talk about it.
Yeah, we see the Mark Selected Fishing Report. You can find all of these on the website, Badger Fishing. It's just badgerfishing.com, I believe.
Yep, badgerfishing.com, because it's really hard to find them on the Department of Fish and Wildlife's website.
Yeah, there's a tab. There's a tab selection there to find these MSF reports. So you can go in there and take a look, and you can see the postseason analysis of, they separate between winter and summer. The winter one is really short nowadays. You can skim through those pretty damn quick. But you can go back 2017. I think you can go back darn near 10 years on the department's website, and we might have at least the last 5 years up on badgerfishing.com.
Yeah.
And it'll tell you everything down to what the season was scheduled as, what the season actually was conducted as far as days. It will give you the test fishing boat numbers. It will give you all the CWT, the coded wire tag recoveries. You can find a lot of information about your specific area and how that fishery was conducted. Now we're talking 5 through 11, essentially 5 through 13. And so to your point, we get into this meeting and we want to talk about last year a little bit. We want to talk about some of the things that occurred. We want to talk about policy that we saw implemented last year, that we want to know if there's been improvements, if there's been internal discussions about how they're going to address this or address that. And it feels like they just want to hurry the conversation along. And so we're going to break this down entirely here today. But so essentially we go forecast meeting. Then there's some regional meetings that are all Zoom call. Then you go North of Falcon 1 and North of Falcon 2. So you get 3 actual scheduled opportunities to be in front of these people in person.
Yep.
And once we get to NOF 1, there is no policy discussions. There's no looking back at 2025. There's nothing. It's all about proposals, how we're going to shape. So that forecast meeting is the place to ask questions about policy, about amending ways of monitoring fisheries. It's a place to really question them on shortcomings that are perceived in not just the public, but maybe internally. And so we tried.
Yeah, we did try. One of my second questions was about the comprehensive management plan, the RMP, the resource management plan that regulates how the fisheries are managed inside of the Puget Sound areas 5 through 13. And a new plan was made in 2022 that you turned me on to. And it has not been approved by NOAA. And this new plan has quite a bit of new restrictions to exploitation rates and a bunch of other things. But we wanted to know, has it been approved by NOAA yet? Is it something that gets implemented? Because once it gets implemented, it's going to be in place for 10 years, right?
10 years.
Yeah, 10 years.
Yeah, so NOAA requires that because Puget Sound salmon fisheries are affecting ESA listed fish stocks, that they require a resource management plan be put together that outlines how we can conduct a fishery without exceeding an impact on those ESA stocks that would jeopardize their recovery. And NOAA, I believe it's something that falls under the NOAA Section 4D as in Delta permitting, which is a requirement for us to have, again, to target ESA listed fish. And they want that as a 10-year management plan so that we're not doing it year after year after year. If a lot of folks have brought this up before, and some folks have misquoted the timing on this on social media, but some folks can remember in 2016, at the time we had allowed our prior 10-year management plan to expire. And that is when folks think that we probably could have sought after our own Section 7 permit through NOAA to determine our own fisheries. And that might have been the time to do it if we were going to do it. But it left us on the water. We walked away from negotiations and we were left off the water while our co-managers still had the ability to file that federal permit and they were able to go fish. Now, we'll get to that situation at another time. I'm just outlining why we have this comprehensive salmon management plan, the PSSMP. I think it's the Puget Sound Salmon Management Plan. And this is why we have it, because NOAA has told both the state and co-managers in the treaty tribes that we have to put together a 10 years resource management plan that is set in stone and identifies these level of impacts to not infringe on the fish recovery.
And we'll get into the weeds on that for sure with one of our Puget Sound, a couple of our Puget Sound advisory group members that we're going to have on the show.
Yeah.
The bottom line is
you asked what was it? Has it been approved?
It has not been approved.
It has not.
No, it has not been approved. Has not approved it yet. It's been sent back for some revisions. Once it's back in NOAA's hands. I've talked to James Dixon at NOAA, and there's definitely going to be a comment period. And we're going to talk today about some of the weaknesses that are inside of that management plan and how it restricts our fisheries. But in a short period, I learned that 500-page document looks complete at the surface with a bunch of quotes of things. There's 200 pages of annotations and quotes, but it's got holes in it like Swiss cheese. And it's not our friend right now. It's not our friend. It should be our friend. It should be a unilateral, equally managed document, but in my opinion, it's not. My next question was on the Pacific Salmon Treaty. And the Pacific Salmon Treaty is another 10-year type management plan, but instead of it just managing the stuff in Puget Sound, it manages the fisheries from Alaska all the way through down to the south end of California. Am I correct on that?
Yep. And California, Oregon, Washington, Canada, and Alaska.
And it's up in 2027. So it's the renegotiations of that Pacific Salmon Treaty are taking place right now. And the reason that is super important, and the reason that I asked that question, was because the constraining stocks that really restrict our fisheries from that comprehensive salmon management plan, Chinook management plan, primarily the Stillaguamish, the Nooksack, Snohomish, the Skagit, those fish, based off of a lot of data, are primarily killed in Canadian waters. Those mortalities take place up in Canada. And I wanted to know, like at this renegotiation, what is the department going to do to make sure that those fish mortalities are reduced? And I wanted to get an answer. What kind of answer did I get?
It was a non-answer. We don't have any jurisdiction over Canadian fisheries. It's currently in negotiation. Thanks for your question, Phillip.
Yeah, that's not a good enough answer. And we've talked at NOF. We've talked to NOF multiple times that there needs to be a place between now and the next time we have conversations in a public period, which is next NOF, where we can talk and bring up these issues and get concrete answers that we feel like we're being heard. Our concerns and our questions and our recommendations are being heard. One of the other things that I had some serious concerns about was a provision inside of that comprehensive management plan, which is the Stillaguamish payback provision. This management plan has all these exploitation rates, these rates at which we can impact fish, and there's limits, 14, 20, 41, just depends on what stock it is. And that payback provision is the punishment if you go over it. And it also is the post-season accounting for if you went way under it. Because in the beginning, all we're doing is we're taking a forecast. We don't know exactly how many fish are coming back. We're just guessing. And then we're taking that best available guess and managing our seasons to it. And then once the season's over, we get that Mark Select the Fisheries report. And we want to know, did the way we manage our fisheries, did it really help? Did it hurt? Were we under by 10%? Were we under by 20%? Could we have given more days on the water in Area 10 or Area 7 or Area 5? Or did one fishery over harvest
Yeah.
stock. And yeah, what kind
Yeah,
of
I think it's the litmus test of how the agency, the department is executing their job. And their job is to construct a fishery that provides ample, equitable opportunity to its constituents and stakeholders without harming the recovery of any said fishery stock. Now, one of the ways that they're judged on that is through this stilly payback provision, which is a provision written into the resource management plan. You're going to hear Phillip and I call it the RMP a lot. And as he described, it's the kind of that way of the punishment that if you were to exceed, it's that check and balance that they wanted to have to make sure that both parties of this co-management don't do something to harm the recovery of that particular stock. And if we were able to see that calculation, then we could say whether we're doing an optimized job of allowing a fishery to go to this point, or we're going to see if they're maybe being over aggressive on the institution of certain management practices or certain season structures or closures, bag limit reductions, you name it. Anything that they implement to us for planning during a fishery, we want to know how it stacks up to the stilly payback, because we are going to hear over and over again that this fishery needs to be amended out of fears of stilly payback provisions. It's important to note that since 2022 of us utilizing this RMP that has this provision, we have not seen or heard of us ever exceeding our agreed to impact. And thus what it requires is, if let's just say we'll just make easy numbers. Let's just say it's a 10%.
We not only have not, we believe we haven't hit it, we haven't seen the accounting for it since it's put in place.
No, not once. So let's just say that we have an agreed to exploitation rate of 10%. If we were to combine all of our fisheries that have impacts on still Squamish, and that's pretty much all of them, and we were at 11%, then that would mean the following year or 2 years following, we would be managed to 9% rather than the 10 that we've agreed to. So that's what the stilly payback means. So we want to see the accounting, and we've never seen it.
We don't, and I'm not concerned, and I know none of us are concerned that we hit the number.
No,
because our seasons are so conservative and cut so short that there's not a chance. And we would have heard about it. If we hit it, we would have heard about it. But what I want to know is, I want to know, how conservative are we being?
Yes.
Could we push the envelope a little bit more? Could we give Area 10 or Area 5 2 or 3 more days did the runs come back a lot higher than forecasted, and then we didn't increase the amount of fish?
Yeah.
Were the forecasts way off? And
well, that's the thing, escapement. Like, what did we actually get back in comparison? We want that postseason recap of that, how we compared to forecast.
So why would the department not provide that information? What's the talk? Like, why?
There could be some motivation or some influence to not release that. It may not look good for all parties.
And we don't know if that's the truth.
Yeah.
When you hide something,
this is what we do know. We do know that since 2022, to our best of our knowledge, since 2022, there has not been a triggering of the provision which would constitute a reduction in any particular treaty or non-treaty fisheries. We have not seen a triggering happen yet. We think that there might have been something that happened in the last maybe year that could potentially have been the closest, if not the closest to, if not the first triggering of it. And I don't think it happened on the recreational side.
Yeah.
Let's not get into that right now.
We got to get into that, but
we got to keep moving.
I believe that the accounting is in the plan. It says that the accounting needs to be done by February 7th at the end of every year. We've gone through 3 seasons now of it, so there should be 3 sets of accounting for the still a longish payback provision, and why have we not seen it? And that's something the department's going to need to address between now.
We've seen
and
4 years.
4 years of it.
Yeah.
4 seasons of it. Okay, good correction. One of the other questions that I asked was about FRAM. FRAM is that computer system. It's the management program that plugs all these numbers in and spits out what the impacts are going to be on these fish, or what the quota should be for recreational fisheries. And it has data. It has base period data that has how many fish are usually caught in certain time periods in certain areas. It's got mortality rates based off of how you're fishing, whether you're using a net, whether you're using a fishing lure. And a lot of that information is super outdated.
CWT.
CWT data. And I asked them in the first meeting, the data, the base period in FRAM is 2017, almost 10 years old. And
Yeah, that's when it ends. I think it runs from 2000. I want to say it's 2006 to 2017, something like that.
So it's been expired for 10, almost 10 years. It's been expired
Yes.
for 9 years. Yeah. And the plan says, the RMP says that it needs to be updated every 10 years, right? And it's funny that it's almost like we could see in the future, because we brought up the base period. And then as we talk a little later, the department brings it up as an issue. And when we brought up the base period, one of the things that the department said is, hey, there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers in the whole FRAM base period updating. And to update FRAM base period, it's going to be a monumental task. It's going to take a lot of people. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of money. And we can't just update it where it benefits one person. We got to update the entire thing so it's super accurate. That's basically what they said in a nutshell.
Yeah. Which is true. We're never going to be afraid to call out wins or things that are not in the department's hand, or things that they say that are legitimate. It's a major piece of work to update that base period. And it probably, especially even more so now with budget cuts. But
yeah. So
we're not negating that. It is a lot of work. But when we ask every single year, and I ask every single year about updating FRAM, updating base model, and it's the same year if it takes a lot of work. So eventually, when you're now almost 10 years post base model, you've had Southern resident killer whale food supplemental programs that were funded and have been ongoing for hatchery increase, Chinook hatchery production increases. And we're seeing those fish come back. That's why we're seeing these consistent hatchery abundances in the Samish, Minter Creek, the Toledo Bubble, even coming out of the fish that are coming out of the Wallace hatchery. We're seeing those increased hatchery abundances coming back. But those abundances and that increase of escapement, of hatchery escapement, it's not in FRAM anywhere. It's not factored into FRAM anywhere. And so we have a completely different biological environment, if you would, whether it's truly environment, whether it's truly ocean conditions, or it's also our abundances that we're seeing where fish are more abundant here and there. So we might see less CWTs here now than we did once before. It's coated wire tags. And so when we're talking about we can manage down to a single dead fish, but we're doing it off of 10-year-old information, then are we really benefiting the fishery? So you mentioned what Ty Garber, he's their FRAM modeling lead, when he says there's going to be winners and losers. And I'm just like, well, what's new? Shouldn't we at least know that the winners are the ones who should be winning and the losers are the ones who should be losing? We're going to have winners and losers no matter what. Why the hell are we not trying to make sure that we're not harming a fishery or we're not harming a stock more than we should be? Or why would we not want to find out that where you say that we have been harming a stock, we're really not? So that was the other question that was brought up at the forecast meeting. And again, the forecast meeting is a place where we should talk policy. And it's where we should talk these kind of things.
We should get good answers on that stuff.
Yeah.
There should be people in that room that are knowledgeable enough that they can answer it. I absolutely respect Jake Rice.
Yeah.
Jake Rice is the program manager. He came from the East Coast. I've said it time and time again. He's just a little bit different than your average Department of Fish and Wildlife employee. He's not afraid to talk with you, and he's not afraid to be candid, and you get real answers from him. But one of the things that I think that he's really good at, and I respect him for it, is deflecting those answers based off his tenure in the department. And I don't know if he's just protecting his people, which if he is, I respect that.
Yeah.
Like he says, if he gets a tough question that he doesn't have the answer to, or he doesn't want to say, he goes, that was before my time here, and I didn't work here during that time, so we really can't answer that question. Dude, you got 50 other people that have driven from halfway that are in this room hanging out. Let's get them to talk about it.
I was just going to say, when we're talking about these rooms that are full of department staff, and every time, we don't have that number right in front of us.
Somebody in that room has that number.
Yeah. I'm like looking around and I'm sure one of these guys know.
Dude. Yeah. Jake, I know you're watching this. Jake, I know you're watching this. We respect the hell out of you.
Yeah,
we really do. And I
and I mentioned this earlier. So when I first really, I came in to North of Falcon, guns a freaking blazing. I was almost unhinged. And like I still brought information to back things up, but I wasn't really polished. And not to say that I'm polished now, but I certainly wasn't then. And so the current fish director or the salmon steelhead manager, Mark Botzel, and his counterpart was the lead Puget Sound biologist, Kirsten Simonson. Dude, they freaking hated me. And they just wouldn't quite understand my adamancy or my approach, which again, it could have been abrasive at times. But so Mark goes to NOAA, then he gets doged at NOAA.
Then he comes back.
I don't know if there's a ton of love lost between Mark and I. The guy still won't look me in the eye and shake my hand. But
he's in the rooms. He's back.
Yeah, he's back.
Somehow, some way, he got a contract to come back there. He must.
There's a PDR out there. We'll tuned
for
some information on that.
He knows the answers to these questions.
Yeah. So what I was getting at, we can move on here, is that so I'm sitting at my house one morning. It's like 8:30 in the morning, and I get a call on my phone that says it's from Olympia. And I was like, what the hell is this? And I answer the phone, and it might have even said Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife on the caller ID, but I answer the phone, and it's this guy who's, hey, is this Alex? I'm like, yeah, this is Alex. And hey, my name's Jake Rice. I'm the Washington Salmon and Steelhead Manager for Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. Hey, I just wanted to reach out. And that call that he made to me was solely because I don't know where it really truly came from. Him and I've never discussed that particular call in detail, but he had said he had paid attention to some previous years North of Falcons, and he had heard from one way or the other, whether it was observation or also conversations with department staff, that there might have been a little history with some contentiousness, if you would say, at North of Falcon and with his predecessor. And he wanted just to say, that's not me. I want to have an open level of communication. And that went a long ways. That is not to say that he's going to do anything special for us. He still has a job to do, and he still is tasked with doing the things that the state needs him to do and what his bosses need him to do. But like you said, he's got a knack of very elegantly brushing off a question or saying thanks for the question, we'll get back to you, or I don't have that information in front of me. But he is different, and it's been a pleasure for me. I've had now 2 years with him. It's been a pleasure working with him during this process, that's for sure.
The next question that I teed up for him was, about the inputs that are initially put in the North of Falcon negotiations. This North of Falcon really is a negotiation. It's kind of like somebody coming to your house and buying a boat from you, buying your boat. And in some of the initial inputs, as we try and get to a point where we shake hands with our co-managers, some of the parties inside of we'll just call it out, the treaty troll fisheries out towards the ocean in Area 5 have high numbers that they put in there. They put in a 10,000, 8,000, 9,000 initial fish number in this modeling tool FRAM, so that when we start going to do our negotiations, there's massive impacts. They've never ever harvested that many until year before last, when they harvested 10,200 or 10,300. But they've always been around 3 or 4,000, and they're putting numbers in this negotiation that are super high. And so then as we start going through these negotiations, or what the state calls shaping, where they reduce our fisheries, we're reducing recreational fisheries to account for that super inflated number that was put in the beginning. And then once you get to PFMC at the very end of this whole entire process, then they go from 10,000 all the way down to a 3,000 number, when all that shaping's already taken place over the last 2 months. And I just called out, is that fair? It would literally be like you selling a boat, and you selling a boat that was only worth 10 grand, and you're selling it for 20 grand. And you told the dude, nope, 20 grand, 20 grand, 20 grand. He, well, would you do 10,001 or nope, the 20 grand. And then at the very last minute, you drop your pants down $10,000 to what is a realistic number. Like, dude, why did you waste my time? Why did we go back and forth and do all this dickering? Why don't you just put your number at where it needs to be, or where it's realistically going to be, within 10 or 15% of what it was last year, so that we can look at real numbers, not like, hey, we're off on all of our impacts because you guys aren't realistic.
Yeah.
And when you
how do they take questions that are in the world of asking about treaty tribes methods?
And this is a part that I'm still trying to wrap my head around, because in society, it does not make sense how they answer it. They literally say to us, the tribes don't tell us how to fish, or our co-managers don't tell us how to fish, and we don't tell the tribes or the co-managers how to fish. So what the Macaw tribe does out in Area 4 or 5, as long as it fits into the comprehensive management plan ERs, we don't tell them what to do. We are not going to talk to you guys about tribals fishing, whether they under harvest, over harvest, harvest correctly, use a net, use a pole. Like, that's not up to us.
Yeah.
But then as you get further along in the process and you ask them anything like, hey, can we implement some in-season management change to change how we manage in season? Or, hey, can we get 2 more weeks inside of a terminal fishery in Bellingham Bay? The response to us is, we got to talk to our co-managers about it. So what's the answer? Do we just not tell the tribes how to fish, but the tribes tell us how to fish? Because this just doesn't seem like it's a unilateral co-management that's even on these topics. That part I don't understand. So to answer your question, they deflect any answer, any conversation about the tribes. And they even say that the scuttlebutt or the rumors is that the tribes are in the room watching a lot of the times, sitting in there as the public, watching the department's response, almost the dad overlooking his kid, what he's saying. You better be careful. You better answer that question the way it's supposed to be answered. And I was even at the PFMC meeting, and the very last PFMC meeting on Sunday down in Portland, Oregon, and we're sitting there talking about the fisheries, and a tribal member walks in and sits down, and it was like so awkward. Every single department staff starting to wiggle and whir and squirm, and they're pulling their phones out, taking a picture, zooming in with their phone. I'm like, dude, what the heck's going on? Like, why is this so? Because there's some dynamic there that, from an outside perspective, that I've never been involved with it, I don't understand it, honestly.
Yeah. And I think we're almost right now, folks, we're just kind of dissecting the questions that we asked at the forecast meeting, responses that we got, and we're tying it into things that we saw down the road. But I'm going to always take this position, and it's a hard position to take, but I'm always going to take this position that there is fact to the department's statements of that they don't have oversight over tribal fisheries, over treaty fisheries. And so it is, I appreciate anyone who gets involved and makes a statement in NOF that might have some tribal fishery topic within it, but I kind of wince almost every time because that and we'll express places where we can be better about this, but we need to understand that when we go to the department, if you have a question that might have some tribal connection, some treaty fishery connection, we need to do a really good job of making sure that we frame that question to where it's something that the department can speak on, or something that they are responsible for, that they have some form of piece of the pie in, or just something that they are actually tangibly responsible for. We can't go to them and say, oh, we don't want to see a treaty fishery here. That's not up to them to decide. So my stance will always be that I want to see the department advocate more for recreational fishermen, not that I want to go take away anything or go make our treaty co-managers do anything different necessarily. I just want to see our department maybe have the level of advocacy that we see the treaty tribes have for themselves. So with that said, I think the questions we asked at forecasts we didn't ask them to cross that line. We didn't ask them. You might have insinuated that you wanted to. It was more like, wouldn't it be more ideal if our inputs, our preseason inputs, were more aligned with what our postseason results were? Because you and I discussed this in detail prior to that meeting of how do we ask this question, and I think you did a good job dancing around it. But people knew. They knew.
It was a loaded question, respectful loaded question. And it's important for everybody to know that when you go and you ask these questions, you can't be an ignorant person. And when you go and ask these questions that are heavy, uncomfortable questions, you need to understand the history behind it. You and I are fishing as a privilege. The co-managers, the tribal fisheries, are taking place because of rights that they obtained way before any of our grandparents, our great grandparents were even alive.
Yeah.
And they gave up large swaths of land in exchange for things that were written in treaties. And those treaties are supreme law. They supersede everything. And so I respect that. I completely understand it. And I would never discredit any of that. But when certain things take place inside of the management of this co-managed fishery, and when you and I's tax dollars heavily go to fixing some of these problems that our ancestors ruined by Western civilization getting developed all over the Puget Sound and ruining the habitat, I just want to have a frank, open, respectful conversation on when I feel like things aren't unilaterally managed the same way. And if the response was reasonable and I understood it, I would never ask the question again. But when it gets completely ignored, and then everything that you see in social media or from records requests or documents that you see online don't align with that, it's just, I get uncomfortable. And I want to be comfortable. And so I want to ask the question.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Mark Boxell, thank you so much for saying that on the record. I love to be comfortable.
I mean, when high-ranking department staff are saying that things are being implemented as management criteria, not based on biological data, but instead on policy in order to keep our co-managers comfortable, that's just
You can't say that on record. Whether it's true or not, that was terrible. It's true or
Oh,
not, that was terrible. We went down. That was the recap of pretty much the forecast meeting.
yeah,
There was
yeah.
one.
There was something so that I wanted to make sure that I talked on for my Area 7 peeps. Ask anybody about what they felt about last season, 2020, summer 2025, Marine Area 7. And they're all going to say that sublegal closure was bullshit. And for the first time since we saw fishery control in Marine Area 7, we saw a sublegal encounter threshold or fishery control get reached and be the reason for closing us 19% short of catching our quota. And that was in a matter of on our 5th day that they decided that we'd hit that sublegal number. Now, we will talk at some point about how they come up with that number, full Murphy method.
One question on that. Was the sublegal and encounter a thing prior to the 2022 comprehensive management? So it's
No.
something new
Yeah.
that is we're getting managed to this number right now because NOAA is in the process of approving the management plan that a lot of people have a lot of issues with.
Yes.
So when a lot of people ask, hey, what can you do? When NOAA opens this public comment period, there needs to be a full court press on talking about things that just don't work.
Yes. Yep.
It's almost been like a benefit to us that NOAA didn't approve it right away, because we've now gotten like 2 or 3 or 4 seasons of real-time management of this plan to see where the inadequacies are.
Yeah. Yeah. And that being one of them. I wanted to ask on a policy level, nuts and bolts, what happened in Marine Area 7 is that test boats had a high encounter rate with sublegal fish. Predominantly one boat in one portion of the marine area, which is the largest marine area in the state, mind you. Vast majority of the fleet for Marine Area 7 tends to fish in the Rosario Strait area. Not a lot of sublegals were being caught there, but there were sublegals caught in another part of the area. They extrapolate that number and they apply it to the entire fleet. All of a sudden, we're at 90% of our sublegal quota and we get shut down. So I had conversations with Jake Rice in the off season leading up to the forecast meeting, and I made sure to ask if there was any sort of discussions with the sampling teams on how they could improve the accuracy of that extrapolated data to better fit what is actually occurring in the fishery. I wanted to know if their aerial survey team can relay to their test fishing team that there seems to be a high influx active fishing vessels in this area. If you are not test fishing in that area, please go test fish that area. I don't want them clear out in President's Channel towards Waldron Island where there's a half a dozen boats, sublegal fish, when there's 200 boats out in front of Tide Point, Eagle Bluff, Reef Point, where the test boat should be. And so I asked the question on how they, and I got a very department type answer. Discussions are ongoing. Yeah, we're looking at implementing something. And I was like, dude, it's pretty easy to text the test boat, be like, 200 boats counted at Reef Point. You should go there. And then that way our test boats are in the areas that our fleet is in and that they are getting more accurate data that can be extrapolated across the fleet. Ann Stevenson is with the model or the sampling unit, I believe. She is very easy to talk to. She's responsive. I believe that they want their science to be accurate and be reflective of the fishery. They really did not like that last year. But here was the answer that we got last year when we're saying that this is wrong. I don't know. My boat fished all 5 days. Not one sublegal fish was caught all 5 days. They said, well, we don't have any salmon trip reports. We don't have any voluntary trip reports to compare to our test sampling. To date, I think maybe we've had one. And so that
is a that's a prime example.
Yeah. So you almost got out of this forecast discussion without breaking down the VTR question. So right there is a reason why we as a fishing public need to put forth effort to fill out our VTRs and our STRs, our voluntary trip reports and our salmon trip reports. And I cannot be any more clear about this. There are some conflicting messages out there on these things. There's some bad info, and then there's also just some unknown. And so I can understand the skepticism of the unknown. If we gave the department 100,000 VTRs, how do we know that wouldn't get used against us? I can't guarantee you it won't be used against us. But here's what I do know. I do know that they can't ever come to me. I can't ever have Jake Rice come to me and say, well, Alex, we got only one STR back for all 5 days in Marine Area 7. So you want me to just take your word on it? And that's what our science is going to be? Sublegal encounters, unmarked encounters, those are going to always be based off of test boat data for in-season management. If you send in a VTR, they're not counting it up and it's not going against our quota. Just for a comparative speaking, so that we have a leg to stand on when we bring some arguments to these guys. So we ask,
just go to the Department of Fish and Wildlife, type in voluntary trip report, easy to fill out. You go to Badger, link to it. And hopefully next year they'll get app fixed. VTRs will be built right into the, you can just fill it out like you do when you go to Canada. Because the way it is when you fish in Canada.
Yep.
It's easy.
Yeah, you get the email. I think we get the emails more frequently because we buy one-day licenses, but you do get emails on submitting your trip reports from Canada. So that was forecast. We got to run down the forecast, and we'll probably spare you guys of identifying all the stocks and where they all lined up. And I could give you probably a real brief synopsis of what came out of the forecasts. Phillip talked about earlier, 16% overall on hatchery, and I think something around 6-7% increase on unmarked or natural origin returns. We saw still Guamish, the Stilly increase was 20% increase on their hatchery return and 18.5 increase overall.
When you heard that, what did you think? What was the initial feeling like?
So in the RMP, there's a threshold of a certain number of fish to come back for any particular stock run. And once that threshold is hit, it goes to what's called an upper management. So there's a UMT, upper management threshold. And then there's the LAT, the low abundance threshold. That number is like, I'm going to butcher it right now. It's either 12, it's 1,500, I want to say. It is 1,500. And we were sitting right around 1,300 total fish or something like that. And so we're really close, 1,380. We're 120 short. But I was like, oh my God, this might be the year we get that UMT. They're gonna lift the E on hatchery fish, and we won't be bound to our impacts on hatchery fish. But yeah, when I see 18.5% overall in Stilly, I'm thinking like, oh dude, we shouldn't see any decreases. Skagit Springs were up 21% on unmarked and 14.5% overall marked and unmarked on Skagit Springs. Let's see, 2026, you had 7,370 hatch fish for Skagit Fall. That's 12.5% up. 63,000 Samish River Kings coming back. Yeah, it was abundances. And then we saw what happened. But
yeah, so what Pat Patillo mentioned, we got to NOF 1. So we did the forecast meeting, then we got to NOF 1. And one of the questions that Pat asked, he just basically got up in front of everybody and said, frankly, hey, screw Nooksack, screw Stillaguamish. We don't even got to worry about those fish. Our constraining stock this year is going to be the Snohomish.
yep.
And I'll let you explain what that meant, but he basically said, he called everybody out, hey, the Snohomish is going to be the problem. And the department basically hushed him in front of everybody. They basically said, man, Pat, it's way too early in this whole process. You don't know that. We don't have our inputs from Alaska. We don't have our inputs from Canada.
Yeah.
And I just feel if we really know, if people know, if Pat knows, then somebody in the department's got to know, or one of the co-managers got to know that this is an issue.
Yeah.
And we can get on top of that early, and then we can start discussing and making plans on how to have fisheries. So explain what the issue was with Snohomish.
So Snohomish is broken down into two different stock compositions. I think there's a fall yearling, fall fingerling. I'm probably butchering that, but it's broken down into 2 different stock compositions. And one of these stock compositions is their ages 2 to 3 fish. And there's a 3 to 5 and there's 2 to 3 or 0 to 2. Basically what it means is that we're going to have a younger abundance of fish for that stock that's coming back. So they're able to somehow forecast that this particular year we're going to see this 2-year-old stock composition come back and in a number that is, when you punch that into Fram, it almost doubles the exploitation rate that's being forecasted on the fishery when they consider the large amount of these 2-year-old fish that are going to come back. And the presumption is that those 2-year-old fish are going to impact a number of different ER trigger, or we're going to have a number of different ER triggering impacts that are going to occur specifically for sublegals. And they're essentially going to be like jacks in that they're not going to be big enough to keep. And the presumption is that there would be a much higher impact onto the fishery in the run because of this higher stock composition of these 2-year-old returning fish, which to me is crazy that we're going to forecast that. We have no idea if it's going to develop, but the fact that there is some way within Fram, which is what the fisheries run assessment model, that can account for 2-year-old stock compositions, and having a high rate of 2-year-old stock composition, we then have a higher exploitation rate. It just doesn't seem right. Something seems flawed. And a guy like Pat Patillo, who's helped design Fram, essentially, he could explain that in a way that is going to go over all of our heads. I'm still not sure if I even fully understand it entirely down to the science of it and what's within the Fram model, what the input is and where that exploitation rate gets increased. We were never really explained in any deep detail, or at least not in detail that we would understand, of the significance of that. But to your point, Pat brings this up, and it was like, we don't know that to be true yet, and we don't want to get too far ahead of us or put the cart before the horse, and let's just mum's the word on that until we get farther along in this process. But at NOF1, at that point, when we get to NOF1, which is a couple weeks after the forecast meeting, 2 or 3 weeks, they want to start talking about structuring a season. They want to start talking about proposals. But we generally will have the very first model run, but it won't include Canada, and it won't include Alaska fishery impacts. We're going to take what we start every year with. It's called the NALF. It's Philip's favorite piece of modeling that we
It's the definition of insanity.
Yes, it is. Which quite literally it is, because it's doing the same thing and expecting a different result. The NALF, folks, is the new abundances last year's fisheries. And every single year, they start our season in NOF with the NALF, where they take last year's fishing package and
last year's restricted fishing package.
Yes, the package that was approved in low for at the end of the season that we went and executed. They take that fishery package that was that pitted out, just squeezed till it was dry lemon, and then we input this year's abundances in, which originally, when we saw that, it was like, wow, I could pull it up, but we're under on Stilly. We're under on Skagit. The Nooksack doesn't look to be a problem. We look like we had buffer and room to where we might even see an increase. Now, again, that's not with these other impacts, Alaska, Canada, and it probably didn't have all of our treaty impacts at that point either. But it certainly was a positive look when we first saw that NALF, that there was room for us to have no reductions in fisheries, and even probably reinstituting some things that had been lost, or even possibly increasing. And matter of fact, we saw two things that right away when they start talking about proposals. Number one was bringing the winter spring fishery back to CQ. They wanted to bring the things back into the model that were kicked out last year, and that being CQ's winter spring fishery in April. And last year, Marine Area 6 had a large decrease in their Chinook number to help with Snohomish last year as well. Snohomish ringlet stack. And so we saw those get reinstituted. We saw that 3,000 and change fish that they cut out of 6 last year. We saw that get beeped back into the model. And then we saw Marine Area 5's winter spring get brought back into. But even still, we had room, and there was no indication at that point outside of maybe Mr. Patillo's attempts at opening our eyes to it. But we didn't have much indication at that point that we were going to see what we eventually saw happen.
And the part that bothers me is why I call the NALF insanity is because you're starting with last year's fisheries, which have already been restricted, like you're saying. You're never going to get anywhere if you do that. And you're never going to grow. You're never going to get better. You're never going to be able to push the envelope. And one of the other questions that I asked again at NOF1 was very similar to the forecast meeting. Because at the forecast meeting, I said, hey, we haven't seen a Stillaguamish payback. Jake said, we haven't talked to our co-managers yet. That was the answer. I'm like, sweet, here we are at second meeting. Let's ask him. Hey, Jake, have we talked to the co-managers yet? Do we have the accounting for Stillaguamish payback? And the response was, again, no, we haven't talked to our co-managers yet. And I think that accounting would have been so important and vital to have a quality discussion. We would have found out that, hey, we were probably under on a lot of our fisheries. And how far under were we under a fishery? It would just bolster the reason on why we should not start on last year's fishery, because we went way under. Let's start on something more.
Yeah. Were we too aggressive last year? Did we? And I said this during NOF at some point too, that the department does a really good job of doing what they do, and that's operating within this box that they're told to operate within, and these rules that they're told to operate within. They do a really heck of a job at adhering to those rules. That's probably why you haven't seen a Stilly payback provision being triggered, because they get told the agreed to fishery says that if we have these fishery controls in place and this quota total catch in place, then we won't exceed the 9% threshold on Stillaguamish unmarked, and we won't exceed the 14% threshold on Stillaguamish unmarked in our sport fisheries. And they follow that to a T. But what we're trying to say is, if we could see the accounting of really how all the fisheries lined up on that provision, then we would know if we're being too strict, if we're leaving meat on the bone, if we're leaving places that the constituents could have been on the water, or that you cut a fishery prior to the season when in the long run it wouldn't have had an impact, or at least not a measurable one, that would have triggered this provision and hindered us in years forward. So we get to NOF1. It's a question we've asked again, because we kind of called him out on the February 7th date that was supposed to be calculated by then, and a discussion was supposed to be had, and he kind of hems and haws us on getting any updates on where we're at on Stilly payback.
I think NOF1 was just kind of like a feel-good meeting. You didn't really get a whole lot of new information.
Yeah.
And that led into the big NOF2, the final in Linwood. Not only is the entire department going to be there and all the recreational anglers, but in the room right next door, all the all the tribes that are represented in North of Falcon are all going to be in the room right next door having a conversation. And this was the big Super Bowl. We I advocated big time online, and I know that you advocated big time online. You need to be here. We need to have our biggest showing. This is going to be a great opportunity. We've got all these extra fish. We need to talk about this. We need to show the department that we're serious. And we get in there, and I think one of the cool things about NOF too is the tribal representatives are there, and you get to see them and you get to talk to them. I got a chance to talk to quite a few tribal members out in the lobby, and sometimes it's uncomfortable, but some of them are right in there agreeing with you because they're not the low hanging fruit. They're getting all the crumbs at the South Sound tribes. They're getting the crumbs on everything that all the outside tribes are whacking, and we're whacking. And I enjoyed that part probably the most.
Well, you may or may not have had some content that had floated out there that caught some attention.
Oh yeah.
There might have been some looks when we were walking even through the parking lot.
Yeah, we were getting mean mugged.
Yeah,
We were definitely getting mean mugged. But once you got in there and everybody's there, you're not mean mugged anymore. There's guys coming up and talking to you.
there was, yes.
But why are you mean mugging me? Is that a mean mug of guilt? Or did I call you out on something that you didn't like to be called out on? Then show me. If it wasn't warranted, let's see the Stillaguamish payback provision.
Yeah, and I think that we just entered into this mode for so long. And again, there's not more of a steadfast advocate for tribal allocation, for treaty allocation, for their opportunity to fish. And so I just think it's become so normal for these conversations that are tough. And it's hard because, especially in today's climate, whether it's a social media thing with just having a platform for people to say whatever they think, whenever they think it. But it's tough to talk about these things without it going in a negative direction, if you will. It's tough to talk about tribal and treaty allocation without some bad apples being exposed. And not just and it's not just on a sport versus treaty. It's not, look, I'll just call it as it is. It's not a white person versus a tribal person. That's not what these discussions should be about. Does that ugly face get exposed sometimes when those discussions are coming up? Yes, it absolutely does. I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like I can. Do we condone anything like that as far as ignorance or bigotry or anything like that? Absolutely not. I certainly don't. I have phone calls weekly and conversations daily with people I grew up with that are still really close friends of mine that are tribal members. And we had these conversations, but that's because we grew up together and they know that I appreciate their way of life so freaking much. And if it wasn't growing up where I grew up, maybe I don't have that level of appreciation for the resource, that level of appreciation for the water, because I was embedded in it. So, but
a large number of the hatcheries that are producing fish that you and I get to fish for are tribal hatcheries that are funded. Yeah. And anybody that doesn't see that and realize that our fisheries would be even more restricted if all we had to rely on was
So the point I was trying to make was we've gotten accustomed for so long, I feel, to be afraid of tough conversations and to be afraid of, it's not that we're speaking out against any particular group. It's more that we're speaking out in favor of the management and the resource that we're managing. And that if folks like us sat in a room with tribal leaders and with people who are the biologists, the tribal biologists, and the folks who are making decisions with the betterment of the resource in mind, if we sat in that room, we're going to agree on 90% of things.
Yeah.
But it is hard when we start talking about if the framework of our management is being, and the accountability of that framework is being held to an equal standard across all in participating groups. And I get it. It's a tough conversation to have. That does not, but that having that tough conversation should not take away from what the true point of it is. And it's not an us versus them. It's all of us for the resource and for the management to be executed to the best of its capability. So
You couldn't have said that better. I mean,
yeah,
you couldn't have said that better. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I was excited to be in a building with tribal members that
yes, you were.
I
It
I
was
had
cool.
some solid conversations with.
Yeah, dude, I come out of the bathroom, you're sitting in a circle with some muckleshoot leader or something. You had a handful of tribal leaders, and I was like, I'm gonna let them handle that.
It was good. I respect them. They respected me. I made some good connections there. And then you get out of the hallways and you get into the room, and we're excited to talk about fisheries and NOF2 and all this abundance, and let's talk about it. And we got all these people. We had probably the best showing that we've had. I haven't been to any other ones. I've just heard what everybody else says, but we had the best showing that there's been in years.
Yeah, I was
people in person. And yeah, what happened?
They run through the coho, and then they say, we don't have an updated model for Chinook at this time.
It's disheartening because I've listened to the YouTube versions of North of Falcon, and this same issue happened last year.
Yes, it did.
But then you go to the years prior to last year, and it never happened before then. Like,
yeah,
you look at the schedule, they've already made the schedule for North of Falcon next year. PFMC is already made for next year. So they know when those dates are. They know when they're going to get the impacts from Canada and Alaska. They know when they're going to get all that stuff. That's going to come on X date. Maybe there needs to be some overtime.
Yeah,
Maybe
there was something that happened last year with the calendar, with scheduling, where we were like a week behind on something, and they like to use that as, well, last year there was this issue with our scheduling, and we don't have that this year. This year we're back on schedule this year, but none of that
stuff on a Friday. They got the stuff on a Friday. They got all the numbers they needed on Friday. And our meeting was Tuesday or Wednesday?
Tuesday.
So they had
Wednesday
weekend.
It might have been. Yeah, I'm not sure.
They had all weekend and at least Monday to talk about it, to put these numbers inside of Fram and put out a model run or some proposals that we could sit there and talk about. And there was nothing. There was no new information. Literally, I asked them, so you're telling me we're going to talk about everything that we just talked about 2 weeks ago? We got all these people in here, and they're like, well, we do have some new information that we can talk about. We could talk about CWT data inside of the Tulalip bubble and Fram. And I remember looking over to you. You're grabbing your laptop. You're like hitting me on the shoulder. Did you just hear that? Like, you just hear what they said? And you're like writing it down. See, it was like this. It was not an aha moment. It was like, are you kidding me? You got him. Check.
Yeah.
They say, so explain that Tulalip bubble CWT issue that they highlight.
Okay.
Then we'll wrap it into why asking about Fram at the forecast meeting was so freaking important.
Yeah. Give me a second here. I'm just trying to get a couple things organized. So CWT. So we've talked about that Fram is using the base model from 2006-ish, 2007 to 2017. And within that Fram base model, they were test fishing and they were recovering CWTs. And so they are determining the level of impacts that we have on a stock of fish in a time step. July to September is the summer time step. So whatever data was collected 10 years plus ago in the July through September time step is the data that they use to say how many impacts we have on a fishery. Okay, so 10 plus years ago, they caught this many fish that had a coated wire tag from the Stillaguamish or the Snohomish in this area during this time step. So then that data is used to determine what our impacts are and holding a fishery there. We've argued about updating that because we think that the compositions are different now 10 plus years later. That's stuff we spoke about earlier. And then they come out and say that recent as last year, we're going to say the last 2-3 years specifically, because Everybody who's sound to north has heard of the Tulalip Bubble. It is a Tulalip Bubble terminal area. It is an area that is a restricted sized area that's right outside of Tulalip Bay, north of Marysville here, so Everett, Marysville area. And you can only fish between this GPS point and this GPS point, and only X amount of yards offshore. And it's strictly a hatchery return fishery. That's what identifies a terminal area, is that it's to have very minimal mixed stocks. It's supposed to be predominantly one stock that they can identify as a hatchery stock. It's returning to Tulalip Bay where they were released. Strictly a fish for harvest for both treaty and non-treaty fisheries. Matter of fact, the Tulalip tribe helps facilitate this hatchery program. They do it in partnership with the department. We provide them fish from a state-run hatchery on the Wallace, and then they're reared and they're grown by the Tulalip tribe. They do a great job of it, and they release these fish in Tulalip Bay, and so they're all coming back to Tulalip Bay. It's been a lucrative fishery the last couple of years. Now, I've done it before. It can be a flipping grind. They're either there or they're not, and they could be there, they could be lockjawed up. But as we've seen these restrictions on all the other fisheries, Area 9 being restricted now, they're part of the weekend crew now with Area 7, the 3-day club, as Patillo like to call it. Area 9 is restricted. The outstanding fisheries that once was marine areas 8.81 and 8.2, those winter fisheries that we had, they're gone. We've got all these reductions. So it's driven people to fish in the places that are open. One of which is the Tulalip Bubble. It usually opens the third week of May. It's got an improvised schedule, Friday until Monday at noon or something along those lines. Somewhere there was some pushback on how the effort in these areas has increased, and with it has increased the catch. And so once some displeasures or some concerns, we'll say, was made about some of this increased effort and this increased participation and also an increased catch, was to start looking at CWTs. So somehow the Tulalip Bubble made its way into a place where they wanted to look at the most recent year's CWT recoveries and identify that Fram had close to no modeled impacts for Snohomish or Stillaguamish fish. Yet now that we've seen an increase in participation and an increase in catch, there was a suggestion made to start looking at recent CWT data for potentially comparing to current Fram modeled catch estimates. I'm hoping that's coming across clearly and it's not too complicated. But so we've asked for years, and we ask at every meeting, can we update Fram? Can we update Fram? And we're told no, it's coming. That's a lot of work. We can't just do this overnight, blah, blah, blah. There's going to be winners. There's going to be losers, whatever. But then all of a sudden, we've got this area that they've now said, we found an error in Fram, and that Fram is not accurately representing the impacts that are accruing on Snohomish and Stillaguamish fish. Hey, we know this because within the last 2 years, we've caught X amount of CWT coated wire tagged fish from Stilly and fish from Snohomish. So we're going to increase the impact on those two stocks within this terminal areas fishery within Fram. And by doing that, we're blowing through our ER and we need to drastically reduce the fishery.
And for just so that I summarize this so that we're all on the same page, we've asked to get Fram updated because we think the information's old. But this year, not only do we not have the forecast numbers to talk to you guys about, but what we do have to talk to you about is, hey, we found an inconsistency in Fram that doesn't benefit the recreational anglers, doesn't increase fisheries. So we're going to change the base period. We're going to change the information in Fram just for this one little area, but not everything else. we ask questions. You ask questions right
Yes.
off the bat.
Yeah,
You
no,
ask about your fishery, and I ask about commercial fisheries. What'd you ask?
and I'm really up to date on this information because I studied those mark selective fishing reports. Summer impact on still Squamish fish in our in FRAM in our assessment that Marine Area 7 has one of the largest modeled impacts on still Squamish, and that was because back in 2007 to 2017 there was a high rate of CWT recoveries in Marine Area 7. I've identified that since 2019 there's only been one. There's been one coated wire tag originating from the still Squamish found in the last 6 years of summer fisheries occurring in Marine Area 7. If we were to utilize recent year data, including the last 5 years, if we were to take that CWT data and identify that, hey, maybe FRAM is not representing this fisheries impacts accurately, then we would see an increase in Marine Area 7 opportunity. We would see a quota increase because it would allow for us to if we're having 1% of exploitation rate for every 1,500 fish, we might be able to get to 2,500 fish and still be at 1% of exploitation rate. But no, we don't do that because that would benefit a fishery. It would be advantageous to a fishery to allow more opportunity for our sport anglers on the water, to allow more harvest share for our sport anglers. It would present a place where we would actually see an increase in our opportunity. All I can do is speculate, Philip, and that's part of the problem is that we don't get answers. And so we're left in a place to speculate. I don't like speculating, but this is only a two-party system. So I don't know. It would mean I'm having to say that the department doesn't want to put us on the water. And I have a hard time saying that the department doesn't want to put us on the water. That there's something that's inhibiting them getting an update like that done that would benefit our time on the water.
Yeah, so they need to answer that. They need to tell. There needs to be some transparency in that.
You can't update FRAM only if it is going to eliminate or abbreviate fishing opportunity. And then when you have a clear, exact, like for like example of the same thing you could do, but it would benefit a fishery, I'm having a hard time following on why one is different than the other. We've identified flaws in FRAM. We've identified that there is something that's not accurately being represented in FRAM. We could fix that right now. You've shown that you can fix it. You just did it with the bubble. Let's do it for Marine Area 7 so that we can more accurately represent the fishery that's happening.
And so you hit them at the, hey, let's use the data to increase our fishery standpoint. I hit them at the conservation standpoint. I said, hey, if you're going to update CWT information inside of the base period for the Tulalip bubble in light of conservation, then why don't you update Marine Area 7 commercial impacts? Because inside of Marine Area 7 commercial impacts, there's zero impacts for all these constrained stocks. How the heck do commercial, treaty and non-treaty fisheries have zero impacts to stocks of concern inside of Area 7? How is it goose eggs across the board? Like, so forget increasing Area 7 stuff. Let's just make it accurate in the name of conservation. If we're going to restrict recreational fisheries, let's restrict commercial fisheries as well to make the information accurate. Yeah. And you don't get an answer.
You don't get an answer.
Thanks so much for your comment, sir. Thanks so much for your comment. Hey, Leah, next person online. Like, dude, I'm sick and tired of hearing, hey, Leah, next person online. I want an answer, dude. Like, you worked here last year. Enough. There's somebody in this room that can give me the answer. They're going to have to answer that question before North of Falcon, before the forecast meeting next year. Here has got to be, and we're going to talk about it on multiple guests that come on this show coming in the future, but there's got to be better answers because there just has to be. And I don't understand how NOAA could approve the comprehensive management plan with all these holes in it. Like,
Yeah.
if ESA is such a big deal, how is NOAA going to allow there to be zero impacts for commercial fisheries? You're supposed to account for every fish and every impact, but you're going to allow there to be zeros inside of Marine Area 7 commercial fisheries? Really?
Yeah. Right. Zero impacts also with a bycatch of 4,200 Chinook in sockeye and pink focus fisheries. That particular number. But to your point, you didn't make it about treaty or non-treaty. You just said commercial. Any folks who fished up here and maybe they fished the southwest side of San Juan Island, it's when you get into August, September, it's going to be loaded with seiners. It's going to be loaded gillnet boats. They're going to be both treaty and non-treaty, and they're going to have some really impressive hauls
with zero impacts according to the data.
That, according to our fishery assessment model, has zero impacts. But a successful fishery out there that's getting more participation than ever has gotten before because we've been bottlenecked. We all of a sudden are going to say we need to take a look at CWT data to that fishery. So that was the first real kick in the nuts that we knew was coming. The bubble fishery is going to see some reductions. Look, we harvested somewhere in the vicinity, have this number, but somewhere in the vicinity of 3,500 fish.
Yeah, and it was between 3,500 and 4,000. The
Right,
harvest,
okay.
the tribes harvest, the Muckleshoot tribe, Tulalip tribe puts right on their website that they harvested 12,300 or something like that.
Yeah.
So
now we did that off of a preseason catch estimate of 745. So which meant that we were able to have positive, collaborative conversations with Tulalip representatives that I think their preseason catch estimate was probably a lot less than 12K. And ours was obviously a lot less than the 35 or 4,000 fish. They came together and they said, hey, we think that we're going to be in good shape if we continue to let our fisheries go. We made a move to reduce our bag limit, I believe. And I think we reduced one and a half open days on our weekend openers. But we made an in-season move, and then we still ended up catching a lot more fish than we originally estimated. But that was before they've now implemented the CWT recent year information. And they've made it pretty blatantly clear that they're going to manage to that number pretty strictly. So we're going to reduce that bag limit to 1. We're going to reduce the days, and it's going to be managed very strictly, all because a management miracle. Maybe we should just call it that, the management miracle of 2026, where they found a place they could update FRAM.
I love that saying. Let's use that next year.
The 2026 management miracle.
So we're at NOF2. We don't have anything to talk about other than the bubble. There's some super frustrated guys that are spewing out some passion, and some big ex-department heads and people that have been involved with NOF since it started really had to get involved. And they made comment and said, hey, you guys need to basically said, hey, you guys need to calm down. We need to keep these conversations on topic. And they said to the department, you got to give these guys an opportunity to talk about some of this stuff, because it's just going to get worse. It's just going to fester. And we try to keep things on topic. One of the other things that we brought up that has been an issue is the Skokomish River issue. And one of the guests that's coming on in the upcoming weeks, we're going to talk about that Skokomish River issue in depth. But we didn't really have anything else to talk about because we didn't have numbers. But we asked, hey, can you get us a call? Once you guys do the work later this week, can you give us a call and get us on a Zoom call? And they did. They got us on a call. And we later that week, they announced what the impacts from up north gave us, and they gave us a modeling tool. They gave us basically a model run, and they gave us a modeling tool. And that modeling tool is up as of right now. You can go up there and you can click the modeling tool and see.
Yeah.
If you reduce fisheries. So we knew we were going to have to take a bite because of this Snohomish issue.
Yeah.
We knew we were going to have to take a bite because of some of the Nooksack fisheries impacts. We knew we were going to have to take a little bit of bites because of the Stillaguamish, but we knew if you lower the Snohomish, the Stillaguamish and the Nooksack would kind of make it. When they lowered the Snohomish, we still have that Nooksack issue a little bit.
Yep.
And so you go look in here and it showed Marine Area 10, like the lowest reduction it was going to be was down to 2166. So we leave NOF 2 phone call 2.0 or 2.B, 2B, the phone call thinking like, hey, we're going to get chopped in a couple areas, but maybe this is just one bad apple out of one year.
Yeah. Jake starts saying the word shaping, and then you say that we're going to have some cuts. I'm not saying we're going to have some cuts, but we're certainly going to have some shaping.
Yeah, we thought that was going to mean, hey, like Area 5 and Area 10 are going to get cut, shaped because of the impacts of the Snohomish in those stocks. But hey, maybe Area 9 and 11 and 7, because there was going to be some freed up Stillaguamish and Nooksack impacts, maybe they can actually raise up. That's how we felt, did we not?
Yeah. Yes.
And if you look at the modeling tool, they almost led into that because they had a Marine Area 7 summer quota going all the way up to 2481.
Yeah.
So you were thinking, oh, dude, you might you might go up. It'd be a shock if it did, but when you put it in the modeling tool, you're alluding that it might be an option.
Yeah.
But the modeling tool should be the max and the minimum. We get to PFMC2. I went down there, and the first thing that they're talking about before it was almost like it was a diversion to me. It was also like it was like a Playhouse 90 to get our eyes off the fact that our fisheries are really going to get chopped. And they started talking about this closure area. Hey, we'll give you 2 extra weeks in Bellingham Bay in exchange for a closure area in Hale Pass. And that was like the topic that everybody was talking about for a good 24 to 48 hours down there before they really got to us. So we get down to PFMC2 down in Portland, and Jake's nowhere to be found. When I got down there, Jake is gone. Jake is in the room with the tribes. He's everywhere but inside the room with the Puget Sound Advisory Group members. They give us Christina, Haley, and I spent more time with those 3 ladies than I've spent with any other department staff I've ever spent with in this few months that I've been doing this.
So a little bit of background.
Yeah.
Was for the last couple of years, and it started with my good friend Mark Bossel, of trying to find a way to get my Marine Area 7 folks on the water a little bit more. Went from 92 available Chinook days to 5 last year.
Yeah.
And so we've been petitioning. We have our own terminal area, much like the bubble. A lot less popular. It's getting much more popular. A lot of guys have been fishing it for years and years.
Everybody's going to be up there this year.
Geez, don't say that. It's not going to make people happy. Look, I want people on the water. It's just the nature of the beast we're with. Now, I can't sit here and tell people not to go fishing. I want you on the water. But it's a terminal area, and we've got this incredibly successful hatchery up here called the Samish River Hatchery. I just said earlier, 63,000 forecasted kings coming to the Samish Hatchery, a dead river. There is no natural spawners there. It is all hatchery driven, SRKW food supplement driven. And so we've been arguing, we don't got a chance to get a crack at these fish. You give us 5 days on the water, we're catching a buttload of Chinook, and we're catching them quickly because there's 60,000 of them coming back. So put us on the water in the terminal area for a longer period. Mark would never entertain the conversation. We get our boy Jake on board, and I beat him up hard on it last year, all the way to the bitter end. So one of the very first things he told me this year is that he was going to try to get that in. So we do get this proposal in the modeling tool about extending the Bellingham Bay fishery into either October or getting it into the beginning of August, which traditionally it started August 16th. So we always wanted to see if we can get those first 2 weeks. And it made it on the modeling tool. At least it was actually there for discussion. And as we looked at it on the modeling tool, and you click on whether it was into October, or you clicked on it, whether it was August 1st, zeros, like Nooksack impacts 0%, Snohomish impacts 0%, Stilly scattered. You go all the way across the grid on the modeling tool, and it's 0% increase on any exploitation rates of any stock of concern by allowing us to go those 2 extra weeks. So we get into PFMC 2, and Jake calls me and he says, "Hey, I just want to let that we're getting some really good traction on this 2 weeks in Bellingham Bay, but there's been a proposal and there's been a map that's been given to us by our by co-manager representatives. That's they're asking for a closure area, and that they might potentially want to institute a troll fishery, not a gillnet fishery, but a troll fishery, and they maybe want to avoid any kind of gear conflicts if there would be. Now we're already used to seeing certain net fisheries and maybe troll fisheries that go on out there. They're always going to be out on to the west side of Lummi Island. Most folks are fishing over there anyways. There's never any conflict. And he said, "I'm going to get my hands on this map. I'm going to send it to you later." And I get the map, and I'm like, okay. I mean, it's Hale's Passage. It's like, A, it's going to be littered with crab gear. B, it just doesn't seem to be where the fish like to stage. It's a pretty narrow piece of water. You've posted kind of some pictures of what that first map and second map look like. And I was just like, I talked to as many folks as I could that night. He sent it to me at like 7, 8 o'clock. I got on the phone with as many people as I could, sent it to people who I respect and that I knew I could get like a good gauge of the overall feel about sacrificing that particular geographical area. 2 more weeks of potentially valuable time on the water. And generally the consensus was, I'm not comfortable with giving into closures. I don't know of a closure that ever happened, ever came back. Specifically, Marine Area 7, we have a closure on the south side of the islands that runs all the way out towards Salmon Bank Buoy, if you're familiar with the area about the closure. We've never gotten it back. It's been closed for 10 plus years or something, and it's never going to come back. And so there was some skepticism out there. But if we're going to secure 2 more weeks on the water, and it's only for the month of August, that was the other caveat. So month of August, closure area in Hale Pass, 2 more weeks on the water. And so we were going into the meeting the next morning, the next PFMC update the next morning, and saying, yeah, we're gonna give a stamp of approval on this. And we did. And I think I'm even quoted saying, I don't think we see much issue at all. If anything, and Jake was like, I don't want to just say yes. I want to push back a little bit. I'm like, okay, well, we can look at the Lummi Island campground as the point to bring the line down from Point Francis. And we could tell them that we want to push that back up because we want to be on the leeway side of the island in case the wind's wrong. We could just kind of curve around the island a little bit. This just pushes us back. He's all about it. He's like, wanted that. And so we did that. We gave those proposals, and we're like, other than that, sounds like a clean, fair deal. Let's do it. So then that day goes by. I think that was Friday. Saturday comes. And like you said, you down there, and Jake's nowhere to be found. And all of a sudden we start hearing about, well, the tribes have come back with a second map, and they've actually increased the area. So it was as if we gave you a map, you guys agreed to it too easily. Doesn't sound like it's going to affect you very much. So we're rescinding that map, and we're now going to give you this second map that has a larger closure area where it might actually affect you.
And we get on a call. It's a phone call Saturday morning, and I lay it out right from the beginning. I'm raising my hand as soon as the call starts. I want to be the first one that makes my comment. And this is one of those, hey, it's an hour-long call or a 45-minute long call. And after 45 minutes, we got to go to meetings, so we're cutting it off. I'm like, dude, I'm going to get on this call. So I get on this call and I basically lay it out like, this is just, in my mind, this is bad faith. I can't sign up on closure areas. I can't sign up on somebody that makes a deal and then reneges on the deal and asks for more of a deal. Like, if there's miscommunication, that's not on me. That's on you guys. You guys gave us a map. We said yes to the map. And I can't support a closure area that is just going to turn into a bigger closure area next year, or other areas are going to make closure areas. Skokomish River is a prime example of that. There's no, they're trying to get us to agree to the closure areas now. So I just say no. Not only is it no, but no, it's not anywhere close to being a deal in exchange for 2 weeks of fishery in a terminal area for 1 year. Like, we don't know if we're going to get it for next year,
which has zero impacts.
Like, and I'm like, to go back to our other point, you've told us that the tribe does not tell us how to fish, and we do not tell the tribes how to fish. Why do you have to ask the co-managers for permission, number one? And then why do you have to give up something, number two, in exchange to get a fishery in a terminal area? It just makes no sense. Not only do they not want to start on the August 1st, but I told them I wanted to start July 15th. I said July 15th on the call. And I'm like, okay, I get off the call. Then Brett gets on, cosigns with what I say. Then we got a couple of people on there that are just going squirrel on things. And I'm looking at the clock and I'm texting you. I'm like, bro, you better raise your hand or you're not going to get anything. And everybody knows this is your area. You're the only one in any of these calls, as long as I can listen to NOF, that talks about Area 7. You're the only one that's fighting for Area 7. You're the only one that's bringing up the issues with Area 7. You're like the advocate. Even though you're not on the Puget Sound Advisory Group, there is somebody on the Puget Sound Advisory Group in Area 7. I've never met the guy. I've never heard the guy talk ever. And I'm like, the department, you're texting Jake. I think I texted, I texted Christina and like, hey, make sure Alex can talk. Alex needs to talk. He needs to talk about this. Yeah. And we just watched that clock. Like,
I didn't get on the call. Then I'm like yelling. I'm texting Jake, dude, I need to make public comment. Like I gave them my public comment via email at 6 o'clock that morning. And so they had it. And I mean them, I mean like Susan, Kelly Cunningham, Jake, Christina, they all had it. And I told them absolutely not. But what I wanted to do with it was to be like, Jake, this is your moment. Like we support you. Okay. Like, this is a time when this department can take a stance and say, we're going to say no. And that this is not good faith negotiating. You're the one who provided us a map. Here was the other part of it, is that if we agree to this extension map, then they'll help us with the Nooksack impacts on their freshwater fishery, which are inflated anyways. So it's a move that they're going to be required to make no matter what. But they were leveraging it as, well, if you do this map, then we'll drop that number. Like, no, you need to drop that number regardless to get us where we need to be. That's not even a negotiation. That's you leveraging something that you must do and pretending that it's only going to be something that you do if we agree to a closure.
It's gaslighting.
That's crazy. It's just bad. And I don't think that that's a reflection of any malice, or I don't think that there's folks that are part of the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission that are like, we're going to stick it to them, or I don't think it's necessarily that. I just think that it's been ingrained in the method in which these negotiations have happened for so long that that's sort of, it's okay. And this ties into the uncomfortability stuff. Maybe for a long, long time, people just would say that's okay. But now there's this movement we've been working on, and there's this a higher level of transparency on certain management compliance. And I think we know that it's making certain things uncomfortable, not just for us, but for our co-managers as well. That maybe they're seeing pushback in areas that they didn't have to see it out of us before. And to attack anything that they are doing or that they are entitled or they have a right to do, or that we want to take anything away from them. It's more that we just want to see management practices being levied equitably.
Yeah.
And that was a case where it was like a slap in our face.
Big time.
We're gonna no, absolutely not. This is a moment that you can take a stand, because if you conform on this one, it'll be an expectation you conform on all of them moving forward. And I think I was really conflicted because I was really concerned about my constituencies up here, and it's not mine, but my peers that fish Marine Area 7 are passionate about getting them on the water. Like, if I'm the person who's making the recommendation on how to get them on the water for 2 more weeks, and I say no, is that gonna am I gonna get some blowback on that? And I think talking to some folks, it became apparent that, hey, in 2 weeks from now, will I feel better that I said no? Well, how will I feel? Will I feel like I did the right thing for the greater position by saying no? And the answer was yes, complied to that. You say no. And if that means we don't get those 2 weeks, so what? We've never had them. No love lost. But it means that we took a stand on something. No.
You were furious. You're texting me. You were upset. You had the right to be upset. I'm now in PFMC, and they're calling a 12 noon meeting. Hey, 12 noon meeting. We got some stuff to talk about. So in my mind, we're talking about this Bellingham Bay thing, because everybody's talking about Bellingham Bay. In this closure area. So we get in, and meanwhile, I have all these numbers in my mind from the modeling tool, like the Marine Area 10, lowest numbers, 2166. And we get in there and they say, hey, we're going to have to make some cuts. We're going to move Area 10. We're going to move Area 10 number from what it was last year, 3166, and we're going to go to 1600, something like that. And I'm like, 1600? Like the lowest number that was in the Area 10 cut was 2166. And they're like, Marine Area 5 is going to go 2506. And we're in shock. We're in shock because we had just been beat up over this closure area. And I felt like this closure area was a diversion to what, and Jake wasn't in the room. It was just Christina. It was Haley and it was Ann. And they did their best. They answered our questions. It was probably some of the best answers that we've got. They stayed in that room for a long time, talked with us about it, said, this is what it is. And we felt like we got whacked. We all walked out of that room feeling like we just got whacked. We're talking about, okay, so we're cutting because of Nooksack, but we're going to have some Stillaguamish impacts still on the table. Can we please put those Stillaguamish impacts somewhere? Can we put it into fisheries that maybe don't affect? Can we get October 1 through 15 coho in Marine Area?
Yeah.
All these other fish, there was some talk about the Seattle fishery right there in the bay.
Yeah, the Elliott Bay.
Bay. Like there was all sorts of stuff that was talked about.
Even Marine Area 10's winter has a much lower number than it does their summer. So can we move some impacts over to the winter instead of the summer side? Yeah.
So we're talking about that, and Haley, Christina are taking notes. They're listening. Yep, we'll see what we can do. We'll take it back there. We'll talk to our modeling team. So we get done with that hour and a half, 2-hour phone call meeting with them. They stay in the room, talk with us for a little bit longer after that. Phenomenal. Then we get a text, hey, we're going to have another meeting. And this was like 6 o'clock at night or 5 o'clock at night, which it's a Saturday for these Department of Fish and Wildlife employees. Can you meet us back in there? So we come back in there and they say, hey, not only is Marine Area 10 not 1600, it's not 2166, which is what's in the base floor of the tool. Not only is it not what we said earlier, 1600, it's 1300. We're like, and not only are we not 745 in the bubble, but we're going to be 600 in the bubble. And not only is it going to be 600, but we're not going to manage in season. Like, we're not moving. It's 600, period. And Marine Area 5 is going to be 2506. And we're just like, we're blown away. Honestly, I
think 5 took a hit beyond that too. Yeah.
Say that again.
So I think 5 took a hit below that too.
Yeah, it like everything that you guys said was going to happen, like if everybody that's been involved with North of Falcon, hey, you're going to go through these first couple meetings, you're going to feel great about it, then you're going to get to the very end and you're just going to get whacked. Like it's going to get
You're gonna
whacked.
get kicked in the nuts.
Kicked in the nuts, and you're not even going to know what to do. And I was just, it was tough. Everybody went to bed feeling like, hey, we're going to have another meeting in the morning.
Well, there were some sport fishing advisors. There's some guys that were on the Puget Sound Sport Fishing Advisory Group who go to PFMC expecting to have a meeting prior to them doing that.
Yeah.
That historically maybe they would be like, hey, it is, if there's anyone here, then can we meet in room number 5? We have an update and we like to talk to you guys about it. And they didn't do that this year. And that made some folks really upset.
Yeah.
Pat Patillo, Carl Nyman, just to name a couple. Those guys were really upset that there wasn't any sort of communication in advance to making a move like that. And we don't know where we're at in the process. We know Macaw eventually dropped their number down to 29 and change, 2,900 and change.
Did they drop their number down to 2,900, or were they forced to drop it down because of Stillaguamish payback that happened year before last that we don't even know about?
That we don't know. And what we also do, because 29 is a pretty low number compared to what they've normally been above 3.
10,300 or 10,200 year before last is where they were at.
Yeah, right. So is it a payback provision, or did they? Well, the reality is that if they have that fishery at that high of a number, it severely limits some inner tribes' remaining impacts to constitute fisheries. So they have to deal with that internally as well.
Yeah.
But maybe they dropped once we made that significant cut to 5 and 10. Maybe that was part of the agreement. Hey, you're going to have to account for some of this. How it works, folks, is that if we have a 8.3% ER ceiling on Snohomish and we're at 10% still, but there's a 9,500 winter troll number for Macaw or for the co-managers, they're going to still come to us and say, hey, we want some help sharing the burden of that 1.7% that needs to get cut. So, you take 0.65 and we'll take 0.65 and we'll get to the number. Meanwhile, we're saying, well, you have a really high number on your treaty troll. Why are we splitting this number? We've already made the first cut to 10 and we made the first cut to 5 and we've made this cut to our terminal bubble fishery. How about you just start dropping some of your numbers and you make up for the 1.3% that we need to get, or whatever the case, 1.7% that needs to get there. We don't know how those conversations go. So,
and to be fair, not only do we not know how the conversations went, we don't know what the final accounting was either.
Yeah.
Because all the advisors, several of the advisors and myself are asking the department on Saturday night and on Sunday morning and the following week and this week, we're asking, hey, give us the TAMs, which is the actual Excel spreadsheet from FRAM. It shows true every single fish, every single impact. And we haven't seen that. Every year prior to that, we've seen that information by now. But the department is hiding it. The department's not providing it. And there's got to be a reason behind it.
Yeah.
And this is part of that whole communication thing. Like, if you're not giving us the information, what's the motivation? Like, what would your motivation be? So we don't know how those impacts were allocated. We don't know if we took all the impacts. We don't know if the tribes didn't take any of the impacts and we just took all of them.
Right.
And
well, yeah.
We don't even know we haven't even seen the tribal part of the LOAF, the list of agreed fisheries, to see what their fisheries even look like.
Yeah. Have we looked?
It wasn't up there earlier today when I looked.
Did you? Okay. You checked today?
Yeah. And it blew me away. It blew a lot of guys away. So we went to bed. We woke up the next day, Sunday morning, and we left thinking that there was still some hope on, hey, we got whacked on area 10, we got whacked on area 5, but maybe some of this coho stuff in Area 7 might still be there, and Area 11 might still be there, and some of this in-river stuff that has really low impacts that's in the modeling tool made it. And so we get to the deal, and everybody's there. Jake's in the room, Cunningham's in the room, all the employees that never came, they were in the modeling team, were all in the room, like everybody was there. And we start asking those questions, and we start finding out that a lot of those, none of those fisheries made it into the deal.
Yeah.
And there's zero scientific or biological reasoning why they should not have made it into the deal.
No, there's none. So there was no biological or scientific reason of why some of those fisheries should not have made it in the deal. And we know that because some of those fisheries were on their modeling tool. And at that point in the game, we were still missing the mark on Snohomish coho. And so that was a reason why they were going to move some non-select seasons and mark select seasons and some time frames on that for 9 and 10 to help account for that. But they certainly weren't going to do anything that had any potential to increase the Snohomish coho or let alone the Snohomish Chinook at that matter. So I, working with the modeling tool, and had seen a suggestion in the modeling tool and that we had discussed for at least a couple weeks about a potential to see our Marine Area 7 coho fishery go into October. We were going to get our full month of September non-selective reinstated. We were not going to have any problems touching the Thompson River 10% threshold that we have to stay within per PST, per Pacific Salmon Treaty. Thompson River is on the Fraser. So it was looking really hopeful. Conversations with Christina and Haley earlier in the PFMC2 process weren't bright and hopeful to that getting through. Jake had told me that there were still conversations to be had, but he didn't have any reason to think that it wouldn't have a chance. When I messed around with the modeling tool, I was like, I think I have a way of making sure we get that extra 2 weeks of coho in October. And looking at the calendar, I said, hey, I think I have a solution to help with your Snohomish coho issue and also provide an opportunity to put anglers on the water for more time. And that's for us to, rather than be a September 1st start date for Marine Area 7 non-select coho, it would be for a September 5th start date. And if by extending or by not going non-selective for those 4 or 5 days, it actually reduced our impact on several stocks, specifically the Snohomish coho. So I presented it as like, hey, let Marine Area 7 do something to help with this equation. And in turn, we can get these 2 extra weeks in October and we'll still be at a net loss. Like we'll still be at a net reduction. Anything that's added for those 2 weeks was negated by us not going mark selective or by us going mark selective for those first 5 days of September. So I provided opportunity for us to reduce the much needed reduction on Snohomish coho and then also give guys more time on the water. It's like you just don't get that in our system very much anymore. You don't get a cut to an exploitation rate and also an increase to days on water at the same time. And it seemed like a no-brainer for them to do. And then we get to Sunday morning, and every time in PFMC2, when you get to the last day, that last morning, it's pretty much done. And at that point, it's just timing. It's days. When do you want to open? Which day is going to work best for you? These are the days that this is pretty much the meat and potatoes of the season we're going to have. This is the numbers that we're going to have as far as quota. What days do you want? And I'm looking through the coho stuff, and just even the night before, Christina had said something about, it was her understanding it was being modeled.
Yeah, she told me that.
And
she said it's in the model. It's
yeah,
the most recent model run. So I would have no reason to believe that it wouldn't be a
right
big deal.
Yeah. And then we get to coho, and it's nowhere to be found.
It's Kokomish.
Skokomish Freshwater, talked to Kerry Hoffman and Gabe Miller about that. Those guys fought 2 years ago to try to get some more Skokomish opportunity, put together some real tangible plans that made sense, scientific, biological sense. That goes away. That gets
with no explanation or
no explanation whatsoever.
no modeling proof, no understand. Just hey, it didn't make the cut. Like the Coho in 11.
November Coho in 11 that was kind of petitioned for. Carl Nyman was asking for some additional opportunity. It was just not even discussed. And these things that they're hang in front of us to maybe make us feel like there's hope for some things when they could just be honest about, well, the explanation I got from the department staff after following up with them on it. I reached out to them, and I'm CCing Kelly Suswind, I'm CCing Kelly Cunningham. I have a rapport with Cunningham. I know he'll get me an answer. Obviously, I have a rapport with Jake. I know he'll get me an answer. I'm CCing everybody, and I'm telling them, like, look, we created a situation where we could have reduced impacts while also increasing time on the water. What happened? Did it ever get proposed? I will advocate of why it didn't happen, but you need to make me understand first. And really what it came down to was a little bit of a discussion about non-retention Chinook impacts, which we couldn't see because it wasn't an option for us to play with on the tool. But when you institute a coho fishery that's not going to have Chinook retention, there is an impact for non-retention. It couldn't have been much. I never saw the numbers. There's no way that in October we're touching Snohomish. Got to be effing kidding me.
To me, and I'm not trying to say what it was, to me, it just was never put in. Like it was cut out, and they're just coming up with a reason to justify it after the fact with their little tools to give you an explanation that you can buy off on. And that's what it feels like to me.
And it's something about funding, monitoring, and sampling. And all Marine Area 7 fisheries will be done September 30th, so it'll require extra budget for instituting any kind of monitoring or sampling teams in that time frame. But the 8-1 coho, which is all of Deception Pass, and the Marine Area 6 coho will have October opportunity. And so that the most popular boat launch on the island side of this, or the eastern side of this, is Cornet Bay and Deception Pass. Well, you're going to have krill checkers at Cornet Bay for the Area 6 and the Marine Area 8. Guys, I just don't know what you are really having to implement. I'm afraid to say this, but I think that there's some unwillingness that I think I'm starting to see patterns of. There's some unwillingness to expand recreational opportunities when there isn't a direct, when there's not a tit for tat, when there's not a direct, okay, you can have these, if you put your guys on the water for 2 more weeks in October, what do we get? What expanded opportunity are we getting? I think there's a lot of that, and which is unfortunate, but maybe that played a role as well. Whatever it is, that's how we landed. Things that were made out to seem like they were good opportunities for us to expand places where it didn't hurt us. It doesn't seem like it ever even really got anywhere.
And that's right there is one of the main reasons why we're sitting here talking today on this show.
Yeah.
There are some serious, heavy conversations that have to take place that we have got to get some answers to. We talk about the comprehensive management plan and how NOAA hasn't approved it. That's going to be a big thing. That we're going to need to talk about that. We're going to talk about that with Art Tatchell. We're going to talk about that with Gabe Miller. We're going to talk about that in depth on some of these upcoming episodes. And that we have to fix that. That there is going to be a public comment period, and we need to take advantage of making sure that we get the absolute best science, the absolute best data, and equal impacts through all user groups, in my opinion. Still not much payback provision. We've talked about that 10 times today. I mean, the writing's on the wall with that. What are you hiding? And don't force us to, you're forcing us to use legal standpoints to get the information, and using the record request option is not the way that we want to get that information.
No.
We want to get the information from you. And being present inside of PFMC, I think, is going to be a big thing for me next year. I'm going to Sacramento. It's down in Sacramento at the DoubleTree. I'm going down there. Those are my 3 big takeaways from North of Falcon: comprehensive management plan, still longish payback provision, and I got to be there in person at PFMC.
Yeah. Yep.
What were your takeaways?
I would concur on that. I would say that we need to make sure, and this may not be possible. We just don't, we can't control Canada and Alaska, but something needs to be done as far as the timing of North of Falcon in general, where starting from the forecast meeting needs to be some quality, tangible time for policy discussion. And that policy discussion can't just start at forecast. And we've heard some rumblings out of department staff of some regional meetings that are coming up, that they're going to try to plan. They're going to try to get out to the different parts of the state and have some town halls, if you would. But policy changes that we want to see implemented, like the RMP recommendations and places where that can be improved, policy on our fishery controls, our sublegal, our unmarked, and our total catch, how we're managing certain fisheries. Some fisheries are getting managed by actual just total encounters, i.e. Marine Area 5, where we could be managing on just total mortality, just how many fish die. Hook mortalities, you can account all, but we can just go on a total mortality index. So policy number one, and timing, to see how we can revise and we can better this process. And number two is, for me, is we finished really strong with participation, and we kind of felt like we might have fell with our face in the mud on NOF2 with them not having numbers, because we really petitioned for folks to come in there and do. We saw these guys, and a couple of them have hit the comment section on some posts about, hey, I was there, I spoke. I'm nervous in front of people. I haven't spoke publicly much or whatever, but there was a couple guys who stood up and said things. A guy that had some talk about, I think it was the Skoke, or it was a South Sound River. He commented on one of the videos recently, and I thought he had great points. He's going to get better the more he's involved. He said it himself. He's still just learning. There was a guy that sat kind of across the aisle from us, and he'd been fishing with his family and with his grandpa forever. And did he know all the nuance of the process and all the vernacular and verbiage? No, but he showed up. So I don't want us to lose momentum. I think that public pressure and public participation, that's the only way that we show that we care. And not to go down the budget road, but if we want legislature to give WDFW the money that is required to operate the fisheries we love to do, then there has to be some times when we show that we care, and that we also have to show times when the department does something good. And we can't just be a full bash on the department. We do need to identify the good things that they do. And in that way, it shows a level of support to where it condones them being funded to the level that we need them funded. So we need timing and policy, and we need to keep this participation up, and we need to keep this momentum up. The more folks that can learn this stuff, which is why we're doing it, which is why we're here, is that so we can try to communicate some of this that sometimes really detailed and kind of muddy stuff. We can try to clear it up a little bit, and we can get more folks on that same kind of thought path that we're on, and that momentum can just gain and gain and gain.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. You got the goods?
Dude, I got the goods. You want the hookup?
I want the hookup, bro.
Hey, man, I'm really needing something, man. You got the goods?
Man, you know I got the goods. You looking for that hookup?
That's exactly what I need. I need the hookup.
I want the hookup.
So Phillip and I are going to work on this, but one thing that we really want to make sure we do is, hey, we want every single call for us to have some real fishing reports to give to you guys. We want to give you some tricks that maybe we're seeing that are happening out on the water, and then give a rundown of some of the things that are currently open. So we're going to play on that. We're going to call it the weekly hookup. So for this week, halibut's in full swing. There's been some good reports. Was fortunate enough to get on a couple fish in the opener weekend. I was with some guys that got a fish this last weekend. I actually was with two different guys that got fish this last weekend. So the Eastern Straits have been producing. We just wrapped up our Fish Northwest Halibut Derby. It was a gigantic success. We had close to our highest participation. Some
Nice
really
size
awesome
fish too.
some great. I think we averaged over 25 pounds on our average fish weight. So I think a winner was somewhere 50,
57 or something
56,
like that.
57 pounds. Yeah. So I heard of some really nice fish coming out. So halibut's in full swing. Fast approaching is May 1st. What comes with May 1st, Phillip?
Lingcod.
That's right. Lingcod in Puget Sound. So we're going to see our lingcod fishery go from May 1st to June 15th. I'm really excited about it. It's got on us a little faster than I like. Obviously, we give them hell up here in Rain Area 7, but I think you guys have some spots even down in the south that you guys get on some good fish. So one thing I'm excited to try, I actually had sitting here, is that my buddy Connor Martinez at John Sporting Goods, he got me to buy one of these Daiwa Harrier X rods. So I've normally just been running Travalas and with the Dakota 600. I'm going to put a Dakota 600 on this. This is a 6'6", medium heavy. I like running these rods because I feel like I can dual purpose them for halibut sometimes too when I'm fishing shallower. But I think it's just going to be a really solid meat stick. So not a bad price on these. If he still has them, or if you see them at any of your local hardware store, pick one up, give it a try. I'm really excited about it. Once I get a chance to catch a fish, we'll do another report on it. But I'm excited about that one. A quick tip I was having for halibut: we have been very successful running these type of. Let's see if it'll pick it up, but it may not. It is a fat squid, Squid Pro tackle. It's actually called their mermaid tail. This is an 8-inch squiddy squid. Hopefully you can see that. Very similar to a B2, a B2 squid, and we've had success with using those or smaller presentations. Put a piece of octopus behind it. Put a whole herring behind it, or maybe a combination of both. That's been effective for us. We're generally anchoring for halibut, but so we got halibut going. Lingcod's going to be going.
Ocean halibut on the 30th.
Ocean halibut opens up on the 30th. I highly recommend going to the department's website. They have a link specifically for halibut fisheries, and that'll break down all the openings. It varies. I think marine areas 3 and 4 are going to go Thursday, Friday, Saturday for the first month. And then or Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then it'll reduce to Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I believe. But it varies from 1 to 2 and then to 3 and 4 on those marine areas. So I recommend getting onto the website and taking a look at what those opening days are going to be. We have a spring Chinook fishery going on in the Skagit right now, on the lower Skagit. That's going to run through May 15th. Then hoping that NOAA approves the biop. And so we have to have this biological opinion updated. The upper part of the Skagit will open back up for spring Chinook. What else do we got? Do we have any other freshwater fisheries? Trout, lowland lakes. Trout opener was this last Saturday. Great opportunity to get our kids out there on the water. Great opportunity if you have someone who's new to fishing, go find one of your local lakes. The department's website is pretty good on showing access and stocking reports on how many of these trout were put into these various lakes. I have some buddies that were in Eastern Washington. I think they got into some nice kokanee and rainbow fishing in Eastern Washington. I know there are. The Fish Hunt Northwest has their kids trout derby coming up.
Yep.
Highly recommend you hopping over to their website and checking that out. That sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. There will be a lot of boats available. If you go to their website, you will find details on their Fish Hunt Northwest Kids Trout Derby. They will have guides with boats that you can put your kid on, or you can fish from shore. There's a lot of different options. Bring your own boat. That sounds like it's going to be one heck of a time. And that's at Lake Summit or Summit Lake. I think it's down towards Olympia. We did get our prawn dates announced. We'll probably share that at some point, but I'm really excited for this link cod opener. Once we get on some fish, then I'll be able to give a more detailed report on how that treated us.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anything on here you feel is inaccurate and you'd like to write in, we welcome any comments. We're going to call it the Make You Famous section. If you want to make Alex or I famous, you can email at info@badgerfishing.net, or you can text 360-620-1333. Any information on here you think's inaccurate, we'd love to hear about it. Give us the who, what, when, why, where, how it was inaccurate. We'll take those comments and we'll read them off on the next podcast. And Alex, thanks so much for sitting down and chatting this morning. I think we've covered a lot of really good topics. This is a great way to open it up. This is just the beginning of something that's going to be great. I'm super excited about some of the speakers that we have on deck. And yeah, this is going to be the first of many.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty stoked on it. I appreciate you putting it together for us here. Like I said at the beginning of the top of the show, I think we're on something that monumental. I've had multiple people reach out and said that for the first time in a very long time, they feel like we actually have some momentum and we're moving in the right direction. Yeah. And so this is our effort to connect with you guys more. And if there's anything that you felt was inaccurate or that we should correct, let us know. We're big boys. We got tough skin. and if you have any questions, comments about the stuff that we covered, let us know. We will do our very best to answer those in future episodes or answer them to you across the socials. So we're here. This is the beginning. We're going to have a lot of fun with this. The guests that we have lined up are super exciting. We're going to cover more topics, and we're just going to get better and better from here on out.
Right on, Alex, man. I hope you have a great day, man.
Okay, you too. Take care. Thanks, guys.